Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome, living beneficiaries, to the show for living beneficiaries, the House of Hidalgo show on the Estate Radio Network. Prepare for the most educational 60 minutes on all of radio with your host, Rick Hidalgo. The House of Hidalgo show can be followed on Twitter or Facebook by searching House of Hidalgo. Find the show on the web at www.therockofsalem.org. Sign up for the newsletter, and while you're there, take the 5-question survey to let us know what you think. The Estate Radio Network is part of the Blog Talk Radio family of networks and can be found at www.blogtalkradio.com/South Dakota DP. Join the show now by chat or call 619-639-4605. Don't forget to dial 1 to get in the queue. Here's your host, Rick Hidalgo! Welcome to the show. This is, of course, another episode of the House of Hidalgo show with your host, Rick Hidalgo. We are broadcasting live on the internet at blogtalkradio.com/South Dakota DP. This is also part of the Estate Radio Network, so feel free to visit us at the Blog Talk site. Go down to the bottom of the page, participate in our chat room session, where you can ask your questions. Tonight's a special night. Got another great guest with us. His name is Rob Johnson. He's from, he's going to teach us a little bit about Sui Juris, or Sui Juris. Without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring him on the show here. Rob, are you with us?
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing just great. Just great. How are you?
I can't complain. I'm looking forward to hopefully delivering quite a treat for your audience tonight.
Yes. If we can keep this communication going, I think we'll be just fine.
Yeah, I'm quite familiar with communication disruptions whenever I do shows. I've done quite a few radio interviews now. Actually, I'm thinking I'm up to 18 to 20 shows I've done. I've gotten pretty comfortable with it, but I've also gotten used to telecommunications disruptions on both ends, and there's never a reason or explanation for it. Whenever I'm talking to my family and friends, my phone never has any trouble, but whenever I'm on a radio show that's important, there's trouble on the line.
Yeah, it's amazing how that happens. I'm sure there's no alphabet agencies that are causing any of that to happen.
I welcome them to listen in. I actually hope that they learn something about law from me.
Yeah, that'd be great. In fact, to get started here, I kind of wonder, Rob, how did you even get started with all this?
Geez, it started 17, 18 years ago when I got my first job, and I was 14 years old, and I had to get a permit to work. And being of the lawful age to consent, even then, at age 14, I knew I had free will and that it was my decision whether or not I wanted to work, and I didn't need permission from any entity because there was no authority higher than myself to seek that permission from. And then later on, when it came time for the income tax and all that, no one was able to competently explain to me how any of that worked or how any of it was lawful in a country where I'm supposedly free for the government to get paid before I do, to reach their hand into my pocket and take my money before I even see it. I could not understand that, and no one could articulate it to me. So I decided to simply stop believing everything that I had been told about everything and do my own research firsthand. That's pretty much what everything comes down to out of all of my work, is teaching people how to do their own firsthand research and apply their knowledge firsthand to gain that experience to protect themselves in the future through what they've learned.
Right.
That is the very nature of Sui Juris, is of your own law. You do it of your own free will. It's not something I can do for someone, nor is it something I would choose to if I could, because I would not want to rob someone of that experience, which is really the mother of all wisdom.
Excellent, excellent. So I suppose as you start down a journey like that, the first thing you have to do is figure out what the supreme law of the land really is.
Exactly, and when we really get down to that, what it is in its simplest terms, it is the rights that we all share equally. Every individual on this planet, differing only in the levels to which the governments oppress their people, every individual alive is sovereign, born free, the highest authority over themselves, their affairs, and their property. And the supreme law of the land literally is the rights that we all share individually, and law enforcement, therefore, is the protection of those rights. And let's not forget the very reason that we form governments is to secure our rights, not to have some entity trample on them in the name of their defense.
Right. Right.
So, Rob, anytime it is we talk about any kind of law, we have to compare that law to the supreme law of the land. And any act that stands repugnant or contrary to any freedom or right is absolutely void in the face of that right.
Right. And I guess what you're referring to is statutory law and these other fictitious laws that are placed on us.
Yes, these items that have been given the form and name of law, but are not law in reality.
Right. Right.
And this is really quite simple to see that they are not law. If they were law, they would have the title law. They wouldn't be called statutes. There's a reason we use different terms. It's because they are different things. Statutory rules, quite simply, are these terms and conditions of these voluntary registration adhesion contracts that everyone has been trained to enter into since their birth, where we train our teenager to worship their driver's license before even determining if they have a requirement to get one. These are the type of adhesion contracts where we waive our rights.
Right. And we enter into those through registration, correct?
Every single time you give up a right or you give up property, it is through the submission of an application for registration, and you receive some type of certificate in return. No different than a silver or gold certificate used to be, these things can once again be redeemed upon demand by the bearer for what they certify. Otherwise, they are a fraud on their face.
Right.
For example, you should be able to take your certificate of title down to motor vehicles and get the title. People have to understand when they registered their car, they gave absolute allodial ownership title of that car to the state in exchange for a use permit. You do not have title to your car if you have certificate of title. That is not proof you own the car. It is proof the state owns the car and you are the tenant.
Right.
The motor vehicle code itself is the terms and conditions of the registration contract. You are not bound to those terms requiring no license if you do not enter into registration. And at the same time, there can be no such thing as an obligation of law to give your property to the state in order to acquire the lawful authority to use and enjoy that property for its lawful intended use. That's what we call freedom.
Yes.
Every individual is born with the inherent authority to exercise any lawful right to whatever extent they judge themselves competent, so long as it does not harm another.
Right, and we see this applied in other areas as well, where, like for instance, the acceptance of that registration by the church, who registers as a 501c3 instead of just taking their classic by default immunity.
Yes, I'm one of the few people who are not afraid to go there because the church has compounded its sin in not only exchanging ecclesiastical jurisdiction for this 501c3 tax exemption status, they have set grace against law in a false dichotomy. They are trying to create a world where grace and law are separate when they exist within each other. They are two heads of the same coin. You cannot have law without grace or grace without law. Christians will understand exactly what I'm saying.
Yes.
Law is very simple at its heart. It is do no harm. I mean, these are the principles we were all taught. And actually, the very core of my notice process comes right out of the Bible. I myself do not claim to be Christian, but I do love and respect that religion. I do. A lot of what I have learned about law has come through the study of Christianity and other religions as well. I've studied many religions. And the root of all law being self-evident truth, I had to study religion to be able to comprehend these things. And my notice process comes right out of Matthew 5:25, where you are told to make amends quickly and offer to settle with your enemy on your way to court with him. If you do not, you can be handed over to the judge, who will hand you to the bailiff and will throw you in prison. This is why people have to bail themselves out of jail, because they've dishonored themselves. They have not tried to make amends with their adversary on their way to court. This is what happens every time you get a ticket. They use the same process against you. The same process I use is flipping their own script against them, putting them in default for refusing to discuss the matter. Most people have no idea what is going on when they get a ticket and they end up in court. They think that they're in trouble for what they did to get the ticket when they're not. They're in trouble for what they did not do with the ticket. For example, you got pulled over for speeding. You're not in trouble in court because you were speeding. You were in trouble in court because you were already in default. You showed up to court without having answered that ticket in writing, as it clearly says right on it you have to do. Everyone who goes to court is in default if they have not sent a notice in response to that ticket. And my process is about putting them in default in the same way that they try to put you in default, so you win by default when you get to court. I've used it myself. I have evidence on my website where I got 2 tickets, and I got them both dismissed using my own process. I do not disclaim my work as for educational purposes only or entertainment purposes only. I underwrite my work. My book, I underwrite it. I own the copyright in allodial. I do not have a registration contract with the state for my book. I am not under a limited liability protection. I am responsible for the words of my breath.
Right. 100% liability.
Ask an attorney to tell you that.
Yeah.
An attorney would laugh at the very concept of that.
Right.
That's one thing I got to make clear. I am not an attorney. I do not give legal advice. But I'm going to be clear in what I'm saying. Again, that's not a disclaimer. What I'm saying is I do not give advice regarding the language of the Law Society. The bar, the English Law Society, has their own patented language. These statutory rules are written in that language. So when you study their books, you're studying their language. You need a license to practice law because you're using their copywritten material to make money.
Right. So, Rob, do you define...
Same way if someone wanted to sell my book, they'd have to pay me royalties.
Right.
That's what your license is to practice law. I will not trade my right to speak about rights and law for a privilege to practice their language. Law and law are 2 different things.
Right.
You see, one is the language, one is the rights we all share. They try to do that with everything to mimic it, to create a smokescreen to manipulate people. It's the same thing they did with the 14th Amendment privileges that mimic rights that aren't rights.
Right.
Essentially, everyone in this country has been reduced to the status of a slave. They did not end slavery. They simply expanded it to encompass everyone but the 1% of the rich elite.
Right. So, Rob, I got to ask you, then do you define your own words? Is that how you turn that around?
Absolutely. You define your language in every situation. You literally write your own law. That's what the nature of self-governance is, and the manner in which one executes their affairs at law, Sui Juris, is through the use of notices, affidavits, and writs. These are the instruments of kings, and you write your own law in these instruments, and then you act upon it. Whenever I'm in a court, I am using my language, not theirs. And it's clearly specified that all of the words I use or will be used will be in my common language. Their language has no more force of law over me than if it were Chinese. People have to understand these statutes do not apply to them. If they were written in Chinese, they'd know they don't apply to them, but because the language mimics theirs, they believe it's theirs and that they're obligated when they're not. Only by their own consent in registration are they then obligated.
So, Rob, should we even pay attention to their Black's Law?
Yes. Technically, they shouldn't be called law dictionaries. They should be called statute dictionaries.
Right.
But it is always good to know the language of your enemy. They're using it as a tool against you, so it's wise to know what they're saying. For example, if you go into a court of law and you claim to understand charges and then you claim to be not guilty, you have just dishonored yourself and you have no idea what you've said. You've walked into a court of law. You said that you are standing under these charges and proceedings. You consent to stand under the charges and proceedings against you. That's what the word understand means in court, to stand under. So when you claim to understand their charges, you're claiming that you understand the cause and nature of the charges and proceedings against you, that you're taking responsibility for it. And then, in the very next breath, you claim to not want to pay. That's a dishonor. When you say you're not guilty, you're saying, I'm not gilded, I'm not going to pay.
Right.
Guilty means gilded. It means you are going to pay. This is you creating conflict and dishonor. Why? Because you've not first offered discussion to attempt to avoid conflict. This is what you do in your notices when you get a ticket. You send a notice back. You offer conditional acceptance. It's really quite simple. You offer discussion to attempt to avoid the conflict. And when you're ignored, and you will be ignored, they are not set up for discussion, you win by default, simply because you acted honorably.
Gotcha. Hey, Rob, I think there might be a question here. Let me see if I can bring this gentleman on. Area
sure,
code
I love questions.
Area code 402, do you have a question? Area code 402, do you have a question? Okay.
That's quite common as well.
Yeah, I'm going to assume that they're just listening, so that's fine. We'll just continue. Yeah. You sent me a little note about general appearance versus special appearance. What do you mean by that?
Very quickly and simply, when most people go to court, they are consenting automatically to the jurisdiction of that court just by showing up. If you want to avoid that, the only way to do it is by special appearance. Special appearance exists solely so you can challenge the jurisdiction of the court without having consented to it simply by the fact that you're there to challenge it. This is how the court operates. They're deceitful, they're underhanded, and they're shady. If you appear other than by special appearance, you're automatically appearing by general appearance. You automatically consent to the jurisdiction of the court, whether or not it exists. By special appearance, you get to challenge the jurisdiction. And when they can't prove jurisdiction exists, and they must prove jurisdiction exists, they can't merely assert it by special appearance, you immediately conclude your special appearance and you're done. It's as simple as you got a parking ticket, you walk into the court under special appearance, you ask if there is, allowed to the court, you ask if there is an injured party, a real party of interest who wishes to state a claim of loss or harm against you.
Right.
And when no one pipes up, you immediately conclude your special appearance, move to dismiss, and walk out. People have to understand when they're in court, they are not under arrest. All of your rights are intact. They've not been removed by a jury. You can walk out of that building of your own free will. You satisfied the summons by answering it honorably in writing. You didn't have to appear, but you did anyway. You appeared, you established there was no jurisdiction, and you left. There is no cause for that court to act against you. And if they do, they become criminally liable and civilly liable.
Rob, I don't want to put you on the spot, but based on what you just said, couldn't you use this in a foreclosure situation?
I don't see a situation where you could not use this.
Mm-hmm.
As long as there is no damage or injury to person or property, no violation of someone's lawful rights, there is no standing. Corpus delicti does not exist. There is no actual or justicable controversy. There can be no jurisdiction without those elements having been satisfied. If there is no valid cause of action, a court will not entertain such cases. They are not able to. The Supreme Court has already ruled on this. I think it was Clifford v. Superior Court, I believe that case was, where they determined that without standing, there is no actual or justicable controversy, and courts cannot entertain such cases. Amazing, I know that off the top of my head. Actually, it's crazy how many things I do know off the top of my head these days. I'm sitting out on my front porch. I don't even have my computer in front of me. I've done so many of these shows now, though, that it just is stuck in my brain. I can articulate all of this off the top of my head. I pity the cop that pulls me over these days. They won't even do it.
I hear you.
I have a fee schedule on file with the county. I actually am one of the few people that have gotten a notary public to exercise their full realm of powers and duties. I went to that notary with my claim of right to the sheriff. I claimed every right I have. The notary public held my original in their office, created a certified true copy, and served it certified mail return receipt. I have the return receipt. They then did the notice of dishonor. That was served certified mail return receipt. And finally, the notary did their duty, their notice of protest for non-acceptance because the sheriff ignored my claim of right. The notary did their duty, they executed the notice of protest, and they got my return receipt. I now have what is known as a cured, perfected claim of right. I cannot be charged under any statute, any act, without an element of harm. And if they do, my fee schedule comes into play, which I will collect on through the notary the same way.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, the
notary is your strongest ally. The notary public is ranked above a justice of the Supreme Court.
I was just thinking. I mean, that should just be how it applies to all of us, just by default.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the same process that they use against you every time you get a notice of some kind. Anything you get that says notice on it, like a notice from the IRS, that's how they get their standing. They get you to commit a common law dishonor so they can then take that matter into a court. If you answer every notice they send, they can never take you to court.
Right.
And your notices can actually flip the script on them and pin them so they cannot answer without telling you they have no case.
Yeah, I actually did that.
So then they fall into dishonor, and then they default.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, show me evidence of a complaining party. Show me evidence of damage or injury to person or property, a violation of a right. If you can't show me that, if you can't show me a contract or a bill, leave me alone.
Right, and that's interesting wording that you use, too, by saying person, because we know that they've redefined person, but you're using your language.
Exactly.
Right.
The only time that I use specific terms is when I'm in court. Anytime I'm talking one-on-one or with people, it's all common English. It has nothing to do with their legalese bullshit. That's exactly what it is. Mm-hmm. They have redefined words. They have mimicked your language to make you believe they're speaking the same language when they're not. The only reason to redefine a simple term is to obscure its definition. Basically what they've done is they've made the whole thing such a mess that no one even wants to look into it to understand it. They've made it one big psyop mind, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's convoluted, isn't it?
It's done that way for a reason. What my work does is it simplifies it. It gets to the core foundation of law, self-evident truth and individual rights. It cuts through all their bullshit. It makes the process so simple. so simple that you would never even need to use violence or even get upset. That's why I cannot stand the sovereign citizen movement where those guys shot those cops. That's ridiculous. There's no need for that stress to stop. That's why you have a schedule, so you can collect on it when they violate your rights. The only time someone should use violence is when their life is in imminent danger.
Right. Yeah, I have a good friend that says that we would starve and bleed the beast in a hurry if we all litigated ourselves out of this mess. Is that something that you believe?
That's exactly it. 98% of every single ticket that's written just gets paid. We are funding the beast to oppress us. If we flip that and 98% get challenged, the whole house of cards collapses.
Mm-hmm.
And my process is the way to do it. It literally makes everyone their own lawyer by realizing you've always been your own lawyer. All I'm doing is introducing people to things that they've known since they were a child. The concepts of no and mine.
Right.
I say it now, and I've always said it. A child that knows right from wrong is a master of the law.
Yes. Man, this is really good stuff. I tell you what. Give us 2 minutes. We'll take a quick little break if we need to get a glass of water, and we'll be right back.
Sounds good.
Do you need an experienced editor to look over your short story, script, or novel? Do you need help building a platform or self-publishing your book? Are you on the cusp of realizing your dream, but you need someone to help you with those few extra steps? Are you a business in need of an established copy editor or copywriter? Dan O'Brien has more than a decade of experience in writing and publishing, and his rates are flexible. All that matters to Dan is the integrity of your artistic vision, and Dan can help you create the highest quality work possible. Please email Dan today at amalgamconsulting@gmail.com or visit his website, www.amalgamconsulting.com. That's AMALGAM consulting.com. Write Dan today. Start your dreams tomorrow. Do you have hopes, dreams, and goals, but don't know how to reach them? Do you wonder how you could do differently to achieve greater success at home or at work? Do you feel like something is holding you back from enjoying your life to the fullest? Are you fed up with status quo and ready for real and lasting life change? Are you wanting to start a business or expand an existing one? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, then you are ready for life coaching with Mr. Attitude. Mr. Attitude will stretch and grow you and take your life to a whole new level of success by equipping you with the tools to help you to accomplish more in less time, get and keep your priorities in line, gain greater happiness and joy, face your fears, plan for success, be more assertive and confident, overcome negative stress, deal with negative thinking, set goals you will achieve, and more. Mr. Attitude specializes in results producing. Life strategy coaching for the personal side of your life. Small business coaching for those who want to start a small business or build a stronger small business. Train the trainer coaching for those who aspire to become a motivational professional speaker. Call today and reserve your appointment with greater success. 605-450-1955. That's 605-450-1955. Or email Bob at MrAttitudespeaks.com. That's MrAttitudespeaks.com. Mr. Attitude is committed to your success. All right, we're back on the House of Hidalgo show. This is your host, Rick Hidalgo. We're on with Rob Johnson today, Sui Juris, and we're talking all kinds of wonderful, wonderful stuff. And to lead off this second half of the program, Rob, I wanted to ask you, there's a lot of people out there that are trying to perfect these land patents in order to reclaim their allodial title to their land. Is that the way that you believe it should be done, or do you have a different process?
I actually cover that quite well and thoroughly in the book that I have. which I'll cover in a minute, everything about the book. The whole process is very, very simple when it comes down to land patent. You were born with every right of your former king, which includes the right to own property in allodium. Simple, absolute, clear ownership of property, indisputable. You're born with this birthright. It cannot be denied to you. What they've done is they have separated the home from the property. When you buy real estate, you're not buying property anymore. All you're doing is buying a clouded deed to a home that sits on top of land you will never own, that's owned by the government or the bank, usually retained by the county now. The problem with this is you then have to pay a rental fee, which is what your property tax is, because you don't own the land. Problem for the state is that you have a birthright to own property in allodium. So if this right has been denied to you, you can simply declare it in an affidavit. Let's not forget the first exercise of power in this country was by act of declaration, the Declaration of Independence.
Yes.
Every single American has the authority to exercise that power. You can declare what is true in an affidavit. If you believe you own a property absolutely and completely, of course you can swear under penalty of perjury that that's true, that you own it in allodium, and that no one has claims to that property and in any way can encumber it. Allodial property is not subject to lien, taxation, seizure, to garnishment, to any kind of permit. You don't have to get permits to build on your property when you own it in allodium. You can dig however deep you want. It's yours. It's no different than a banana. And that's the ownership of every form of property in this country. The only difference in property is the registration agreements we enter into. I mean, when you go to a store and buy a banana, you own the mineral rights to that banana. You can do whatever you want with it. You can eat it. You can give it away. You can sell it. It's yours. This is the fundamental right of all property ownership. It's known as the pursuit of happiness in the Declaration of Independence. And all property is owned like this. It's no different from your bicycle. As soon as you buy it, your proof of purchase is your proof of ownership, your allodial title. You own it completely. You own the alloys that compose it. That's where the term allodial ownership comes from. You own the minerals of that item. So you can simply declare allodial ownership of a property in an affidavit and file it with your county recorder. A lot of county recorders these days are refusing to file these affidavits. So what you do is you serve it upon them by notice. Notice, declaration, affidavit of allodial ownership of property. Sworn under penalty of perjury. Delivered certified mail return receipt to the county recorder. As a maxim of law, anything that ought to be done must be seen as having been done. So even if they refuse to record it, the courts have to see that they've recorded it.
I like that.
I do too. It's very simple. It doesn't require getting upset. All it requires is exercising your inherent American authority, sending out an affidavit that's sworn true under penalty of perjury that you believe is true, and then acting upon it. It is your own law once you recognize the words right, law, and oath can be used interchangeably. Words are very interesting. Just like the word liberty, I cannot stand the word liberty. Liberty is not freedom. Liberty is akin to shore leave. It's something a ship captain grants his crew that can be rescinded at any time. It's a privilege. Liberty is a 14th Amendment citizenship contract. I consider citizen a derogatory term. Anyone who calls me a citizen is calling me a slave. Of course I'm going to object to that. No, I'm not a citizen. I'm a sovereign inhabitant. I inhabit this land by right of birth. Every one of us are equal to a Native American that were born here. Every individual that lives here is equal. We are all free. We are all sovereign. We all share the same rights. That's the common law. That is the highest law of the land, the king's law. And we are the kings.
Right.
So long as we are acting in accordance with standards of honor and decency in an orderly and decent manner, whatever we are doing, that we are not harming anyone, is a free, lawful birthright.
Excellent.
We were never meant to live under endless titles of code and statute and ordinance and bylaw and regulation. We were meant to live under law, our own rights. The reason no one can claim ignorance of the law is because everyone is supposed to know their rights. Our rights are the law. You know not to violate someone else because you know you don't want to be violated. You know the
yes.
manners in which you could be violated. You know your rights, so you know the rights of others.
Right.
That is the law. Everything else is a contract.
Yeah, I love it. This is good stuff, Rob.
It's the biggest problem, really, for most people is that their right to contract is unlimited, and they have contracted their authority away, and government is prohibited from impairing the obligations of contracts. They can't help you. You have to help yourself. If you want out of these contracts that you've consented to, rescind your consent. Cancel the registration.
Right.
And that's what you do when you do a claim of right with your county sheriff. You revoke your signature on every single registration contract you have ever entered.
Really?
Why? By constructive fraud. These are presented as obligations of law when they are not.
What was that called? A claim of right?
Yes, a claim of rights.
You
simply claim your rights. It's really not that difficult. I mean, the brain overcomplicates these things because it's been trained to. I do not blame the people anymore for the state of affairs in this country. There's been a well-financed agenda, a very cleverly laid out agenda to keep people ignorant.
Right. Yeah, and I think the TV has a lot to do with it.
Claiming a right is simple as writing down on a piece of toilet paper with a crayon, I hereby have the right to, blah, 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 and then swear it before a notary under oath. And it's law. It's that simple.
And if, and Rob, you could, I mean, I'm not saying that you would replace the notary, but couldn't you, in common law, just get, 2 or 3 other witnesses?
Absolutely you could. There is no act the notary public can perform that 3 upstanding members of a community cannot perform.
Right.
The ideal situation is to have a notary public that is truly educated in all of their powers and duties, which is one of my goals, is to re-empower the notary, to reintroduce them to their powers under the law, because it's a disgrace in this country when we have notary public who are refusing to do their duty because they don't know how. It's like a judge saying, I'm sorry, I can't enter this judgment for you today. I never bothered to look up how to do it. I mean, these are called powers and duties for a reason. They're not called powers and optional services if someone feels like performing them that day. They're mandatory. They have to perform these duties.
Mm-hmm.
And you can hold them accountable if they refuse. You can charge them criminally with dereliction of duty, even up to treason, because these rights are so important to the people. The rights of this country, of the individual, are what every allegiance is to in this country. I mean, when you pledge allegiance to the flag, you're pledging allegiance very much, that's what it says, to a flag that represents something, that represents a republic, where individual rights are supreme. So to try to actively or even ignorantly participate in an action that's going to deprive someone of their rights is treasonous.
What do you say, Rob, to the person who is a pessimist at heart and looks at this whole thing and says, well, you know, what kind of enforcement do we have? How do we really enforce this? Because they're all colluding.
They're all colluding, but one who knows their rights and the remedy that they have at law and exercises that remedy will find it. I mean, people who think that they're not going to have success because the media does not advance and portray the successes that we've had. I mean, we never had media coverage when I beat my tickets. Everyone thinks that nobody can do anything to change anything. But the truth is, the only thing that can stop you from changing things is the attitude that you can't change. Hopelessness is their greatest illusion. They want this state of apathy where people believe that there's nothing they can do to resist. All you have to do is start exercising your rights. I mean, you will shit yourself when the attitude of that officer changes once you start asserting your rights. And it's not going to change for the negative in most cases. I mean, once you actually start doing this, you start asserting your rights and exercising them, you get a world of respect in return, especially when you know what you're talking about and you're simply acting according to standards of honor and decency and exercising free rights.
Right.
There's no reason anyone in this country should fear to do that, and if you do, you're a slave.
Right. Well, some people like being slaves.
And they're entitled to give up their freedom in a contract like people have, but they are not entitled to try to force me to give up my freedom in a contract.
Right.
That's what it all comes down to, is force. It's what it comes down to with everything. Individuals do not have a right to enforce their lifestyles upon other people. I mean, I proudly admit that I am not statutorily compliant. I smoke marijuana. That's not a crime. I am not engaged in a contract that even makes it an infraction. Understand, there is no such thing as a drug law. They don't exist. The only drug law that ever existed was the 18th Amendment, and it was abolished by the 21st. The 18th Amendment is fact-on-face evidence. Government has to have an amendment to the Constitution to prohibit anything. The 21st Amendment is fact-on-face evidence that government does not have the authority to prohibit anything anymore. I would support a constitutional amendment to give them the authority to prohibit certain things like crack, ecstasy, certain things that could kill people, but there are other things that I would not support being prohibited. And as of right this moment, there is no law for any drug. I hate to say it. It doesn't exist. The Controlled Drugs and Substances Act is not law.
Right.
It is statutory rule that only gets the force of law by your own consent. You were born your own doctor, very much you were born your own lawyer. As long as you're acting in your own affairs, this is actually something I've been working on. There's nothing to stop you from walking into a pharmacy and writing your own prescription for any lawful medication. You are the highest authority over yourself. You are sovereign medically. You can ask any doctor if you have the right to determine your treatment, and if you have certain rights, and they'll confirm it universally that these are your rights. Yes, of course you get the rights. You're the one that has to live with the decisions. All you have to do is waive liability, and you can write your own scripts. There is no requirement for an individual to have a license to affect their own medical affairs. A doctor has to have a license because they're affecting the affairs of others.
Right. Yeah, we are born.
It's the same reason that the courts cannot refuse you access to administrate your own affairs at law because you don't have a bar license. I mean, they can't stop you from stitching your own wounds or pulling your own teeth. What's that say? They can stop you from taking your own medicines, determining your own medicines. And let's get this clear. Prescription was never intended to be licensed to possess medicine, and that's what it's become.
Right.
And now we have this climate of fear amongst doctors pressed upon them by the DEA when prescribing narcotic painkillers. This is absolute interference in the medical affairs of the people, and it's doing nothing but fueling the black market.
Right.
You want to end the war on drugs now? Decriminalize every single one of them. Let individual people be responsible for their actions, and what will happen is just like what happened with alcohol. It will become less dangerous because it will be more pure and sold by reputable businesses. There won't be people robbing your house to fuel their addiction because it will be affordable, because there won't be this inflation of price due to the black market. Let's see, what else? Oh, yeah, it will be less available to children. I remember when I was in my 15, 16 years of age range, I could not get alcohol to save my life, but I could get a joint anytime I wanted.
Wow.
There is no one on the corner slinging liquor, okay?
Yeah, I hear you.
There's just no profit margin for it. It doesn't work that way. The profit margin and the crime is created by the very criminal prohibition itself. Every act of drug enforcement is a crime committed by the police.
Right.
And now they're conducting these paramilitary raids in our neighborhood with guns, shooting things in public. Because what? Someone wants to buy something that they don't agree with? It's a substance. There's no such thing as something inanimate that's criminal.
Well, I'm familiar with the word arrest, Rob. I understand that it's a maritime word that actually was used on the law of the seas.
Which was?
The word arrest.
Arrest? Indeed.
Yes.
It means to stop. It really does.
Yeah.
So anytime you're pulled over, you've been arrested.
Right.
And if the cop is going to arrest me, he had better have a damn good reason. A warrant, or be able to swear under penalty of perjury that he witnessed me harm someone, or he's going to jail.
Right.
Understand, it is a felony for them to even use their emergency lights to pull you over if there's no emergency. It's no different than you walking into a theater and pulling the fire alarm when there's no fire.
Right. Well, I know where they're coming from. So you just injured the state. You know, that little fiction that runs around and calls itself the state. I've never met him before,
yes.
But yeah.
Problem is, the state is not a complaining party. Watch this. It's preponderance of evidence when you're in a court of law and you're charged with whatever you're charged with. If it's not a felony where you're before a grand jury, you are being charged by a fictitious entity that doesn't exist. The burden of proof is preponderance of evidence. So what you ask is for evidence of a complaining party. You make them prove that the state exists, that you were within the state. What is the state? The state is a contractual agreement between people. If you're not in contract, you're not in the state.
So is that step one, Rob? I mean, let's break this down for the person who's listening, who's thinking, you know, I'd sure love to get out of this mess. I'd love to live a sovereign
Step
life
one,
as a king. Yeah.
Step one is that we have no prerequisite to exercise any right. The reason that we use notices is simply because we are mature, responsible adults, and we can foresee that there will be conflict if we exercise certain rights without permit in this current society. So what we do is we give notice to who? The highest law enforcement officer in the county, in the land, the sheriff, equal to president within the county, CEO of every court within the county, the chief protectorate of the rights, the oldest law enforcement office under the system of common law. This is
right.
The highest constitutional law officer in the county. That's what the sheriff is. You give him notice that you're going to be exercising these rights. If anything you're claiming is unlawful, they have a duty to tell you. This is where it all begins. You give notice, you make claim of right, you're ignored. You get to assume, by their silent acquiescence, that everything you've claimed is lawful. Because if it weren't, they would have had to tell you. So you act upon that. That is then a cured claim of right once it goes through the process with the notary all the way through to protest for non-acceptance. You can then walk into any court when you're charged with any statutory violation with these three notices that you sent and assert lawful excuse, color of right, that the reason you violated these statutes is because you are fulfilling a duty to claim and exercise rights. That is the most powerful argument you can make in any court. The biggest problem is people argue their rights in court. But when you're getting when you're at trial and an officer's testifying against you, he's not testifying to his rights. He's testifying to his duty. If you want to win, your argument has to be on the same level. You testify to your duty to your rights, to protect them for the existence of future generations. That is why you claim and exercise these rights. That is why you are violating these statutes that infringe them, because you have a duty to fulfill them.
That's good. So, do you,
when you do that, the judge will actually smile. Judges love people that argue their duties. Those who have negative experiences in court aren't arguing correctly.
Mm-hmm. As a step one, Rob, do you just go and rescind every contract?
Yeah, step one is notice of understanding, intent, and claim of right to your county sheriff. Perfecting that claim of right. It claims every right, and at the same time, it nullifies every contract. Because every one of those registration contracts are already void. You have to understand that's so important. Every one of them are already void. You just have to draw attention to it. They're acting upon assumptions of consent. There is no consent because you did it under the perception of an obligation. It's called duress. Duress is not any time you have a gun to your head. Things are not done of your own. You have to waive rights by your own knowingly consent, your own free will. You have to intend to waive a right. You cannot do it accidentally or in ignorance.
Right.
That's one of the reasons I will never write without prejudice next to my name if I sign something. I'm not going to imply that I could prejudice my rights. You have to prove that I intended to waive them.
Right. And then I'm sure that you do not use any UCC verbiage on there either.
I cannot stand UCC. UCC
right.
looks good on paper. It sounds impressive to people who have no idea what they're talking about with law. But at its heart, it is the code of commerce. It's not law. It's code. Again, something you were never intended to be able to understand.
Right.
And it doesn't apply to you unless you're engaged in commerce. And commerce itself is a very narrowly defined activity. Commerce is not every transaction. Commerce is specifically to buy and sell. Commerce is not to grow and sell. Commerce is not to create and sell. Commerce is not to buy, add value, and sell. It's not 3 steps, it's always 2, buying and selling. Commerce is destructive because a company could move into an area, buy up all the goods, and do nothing with them until the prices are so unaffordable that they can make so much profit off of them because the people are starving and dying. That's why commerce can be regulated by the state. To regulate commerce means to keep commerce regular. It does not mean to micromanage both ends of every transaction that occurs within the financial system. That's what they want you to believe, though.
It sounded for a minute there you were starting to rag on Monsanto a bit.
Yeah, I can't stand Monsanto either. Your corn isn't corn anymore. Your corn has scorpion DNA in it now. Your corn is scorn or scorpicorn.
Yeah. Right. I hear you. You know,
and again, I'm pretty sure Christians will be aware of the phrase "in the times of Noah," when the DNA was impure. That's exactly what's going on right now. They're crossbreeding genetic strains. I mean, again, I'm not entirely Christian. I do agree with a lot of what they have to say, but I've studied so many religions I can't claim to be of just one. I love a lot of them, but a lot of good information is contained within Christianity. And the way I look at it, every religion itself is just a different culture's perspective on history.
Right. Well, that's your divine right, Rob. I'm not going to stand in your way there.
Great. And I respect everyone's beliefs when it comes to the divine. There are only 2 groups that I have problems with. Atheists, I respect atheists, but I cannot understand what they believe. I just can't, because I see the thumbprint of God in everything in the universe. And then Satanism, or the worship of evil, I can't respect.
Right.
But that's it. Anyone else who believes anything, great. Find your path to divinity. That's what this life is for. Just try to find the truth in everything you do. Don't settle for someone else's version of the truth. That's comfortable. Get to the facts. Do your own first-hand research. Have your own experiences. Experience is what creates the confidence to do the things that I've done, to walk into a court and stand up for your rights. I mean, if we cannot at least assert our rights to an officer, defend those rights in the court, you don't have them.
Right.
Rights are a combat clause. They can only be retained by sustained combat. I don't remember the case on the top of my head, but this was a Supreme Court ruling. There were several of them about rights are only afforded to people who demand them in person. They can't be retained by attorney or solicitor. You have to be in person and be belligerent. You disagree with everything they say. I won't even let them call me a citizen in a court. It won't happen. Prove that I'm a citizen. Break out the contract. Show me my signature. They can't, because the citizenship contract is the birth registration contract and the Social Security registration contract, and parents sign those for their kids. You're not bound by those agreements.
Right. I want to go back for a second to the sheriff. You were talking about this. The claim.
This is important.
You were talking about the claim of right that you laid on the sheriff, and
yep.
I just want to clarify something, and I think that you're going to agree with me here. You want to do that in your own wording, don't you, Rob? You don't really want to use the form.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Without question, everything you do in writing with these notices, that's why I don't do these for people. I make them do them themselves, and then I'll look them over if they want help. But it must be in your own vernacular. If you do not sound comfortable using these terms and speaking naturally, you're not even going to be able to be believed in a court because you can't believe yourself. You have to know what you're saying and what you're talking about, so of course it's better to use your own words than to try to sound impressive and use theirs when their words don't mean shit anyway.
Right.
It's true, their words are nothing. They're garbage.
Right.
That's where the term barbarian speak came from. It's meaningless. It's gibberish. And that's who they are. They're the bar. And let's be clear about this. If it's not a direct acronym, British Accreditation Registry, that is what it is through its action by definition of what it does. The bar is a British-owned corporation based in England. It's the English Law Society. Every single state branch, the American bar, these are all just franchisee branches of the English bar, no different than McDonald's in Iraq is a franchisee branch of McDonald's in America. They're the same entity owned by the same company, the Crown of England. The bar is an operational arm of the Crown of England. What it does is, in exchange for oath of allegiance, it grants noble title Esquire to people authorized to practice their language. You trade your right to speak about law for a privilege to practice it. You swear an oath of allegiance to the Crown of England in exchange for noble title. It accredits lawyers. They maintain a registry of them because they have a list of all the people with Esquire on their name.
Right.
That's what the bar is. Whether it's a direct acronym or not, they are the British Accreditation Registry.
Right. Well, Rob,
and to go into that a little bit further, they conquered our country in 1812. We lost the War of 1812, to be specific about that. The 13th Amendment that started the War of 1812 is not the 13th Amendment we all know of as the abolition of slavery. The original 13th Amendment, which was proven to have been lawfully ratified, this is not conjecture, it was printed by a legislature in a copy of the Constitution that was authenticated from 1825. It appears in that Constitution, so it's the law of the land everywhere today. They just stopped printing it. It's no different than if they would have just stopped printing the Second Amendment. It is still the law of the land. In order to abolish an amendment, you have to repeal it with another amendment. You can't just stop printing it. So this Titles of Nobility Amendment is still the law of the land, and it has precedent. Article 6 of Articles of Confederation prohibited titles of nobility.
Yes.
There are currently 2 provisions of the Constitution that prohibit the granting of titles of nobility by the government. So anyone who has a title of nobility got it from swearing an oath of allegiance to a foreign power. This is important because even without the original 13th Amendment, a lawyer still cannot hold an office of public trust or profit because of the oath of office. You would have to perjure yourself to swear the oath of office if you're a lawyer because you already have sworn an oath of allegiance. Obama was a lawyer. He perjured himself when he swore the oath of office.
Right. Yeah, and it actually even gets worse than that, because a potentate is a foreign power as well, and we know that the chief official of the what do you call them, the Masons is a potentate.
Mm-hmm. And look at what they've done. There's a reason we weren't supposed to allow people with noble title in our offices of public trust or profit. Look at the legalese garbage that now passes through the House. Understand, congressmen and senators are not supposed to be lawyers. They're supposed to be common men, common women. Law is supposed to be written in a language that everyone can understand. If the law is not able to be understood by an individual with average intelligence, it's void for vagueness, not law. If it's not in agreement with the supreme law of the land, it's not law. I mean, any unconstitutional act is not law. The Supreme Court has ruled on this unanimously. Any act that infringes any right is not law. It's void, retroactively to the date it was passed.
Right. Well,
and that includes any Supreme Court ruling. Any act, not just legislative, but any action done by any officer of the public. Anything performed by anyone in the public that's unconstitutional is not law or lawful. So a Supreme Court ruling that disagrees with something in the Constitution is not law. The Supreme Court cannot legislate your Second Amendment away. A million moms can't band together and get rid of your Second Amendment. It's an individual right that's unalienable. It's your property as if it were attached to you. It can't be removed any more than an arm or a leg.
Right. Well,
rights cannot even be brought to a vote in our form of government. We are not a democracy. We are a republic, a self-governing constitutional republic.
That's correct. Yeah, amen to that, Rob.
I really delivered some good stuff for your audience tonight so far. I mean, we didn't have too much time, only 1 hour. I'm used to doing 2-hour shows, but I think we managed to squeeze a lot in so far.
Yeah, we managed to squeeze a lot in. I gotta end this, Rob, but I want you to go ahead and tell people where to go to find more information.
Oh, great. You can go to, actually operate 2 websites. They're identical. You can go to suijurislaw.co or suijurislaw.net. You can throw Sui Juris Law in any of your favorite search engines. I believe I'm the first that comes up under those 3 keywords. My book costs less than a parking ticket, and you'll never have to pay one again. For the price I charge, a mere $41.75, it empowers you to administrate all of your own affairs at law, no matter what they are. You no longer need me to help. You can do it all yourself. But for those who don't feel practiced, I do sell blocks of my time to give consultation. And I also just started a new consultation service specifically for traffic stops. People can call me in the middle of a traffic stop, and basically it's like reverse AAA. You don't get your car towed.
That's great.
I do operate a Facebook group that has been secret for a while because Facebook won't let me change it back to public. But the Facebook group is called Sui Juris Law, the Self-Governing. anyone who is a member can add anyone to it. But for the most part, the book I sell is Sui Juris, the Law of Full Age, Your Sovereign Claim to Unalienable Individual Rights, and you can get it at suijurislaw.co and suijurislaw.net.
All right. Well, Rob, I just want to thank you for being on the program today. This has been pretty awesome, man.
Thanks for having me on. I love getting the opportunity to come on these shows and talk about this stuff because I love what I do. I love empowering people to find their freedom. I don't want to lead anyone. I want people to lead themselves to freedom.
10-4. We don't really need another Moses anymore anyway because we're all supposed to be kings. So thanks a lot, Rob.
That's exactly the point.
Yes. So, Rob, I'm going to sign off now. I appreciate you coming on the show. For Rob Johnson, this is Rick Hidalgo. This has been another episode of the House of Hidalgo show on the Estate Radio Network. We thank you all for coming. God bless. Good night, and everyone stay safe.